Good morning and Happy New Year. Welcome to this online Your Electric event, Connecting the Dots. We are going to talk about the importance of distribution grids for the energy transition today and the need for investments in this critical infrastructure. So why this headline, Connecting the Dots? Well, what we're talking about in this energy transition is in reality the most fundamental and comprehensive industrial evolution that we're going to see in the 21st century. What's special about it is that it is really dispersed and decentralized. Our sector, the electricity sector, will decentralize massively over the next 20, 30 years. But we're also going to see a shift in every single powertrain of every single car in Europe. We're going to see changes in industry. We're going to see changes in buildings. Something needs to connect all these dots and make a meaningful matrix out of it, and that's the distribution grids, hence the importance of this infrastructure for the energy transition. My name is Christian Buchel. I'm the Secretary General of Eurelectric, and I'm going to guide you through this event today. We have a brand new study that I'm very, very excited to share with you today. We have done this in cooperation with our partners at E.DSO, the other major grid association in Brussels, together with Deloitte and partners in 10 different countries. On the next slide, we're going to show you what you're going to go through today with us if you stay online until the bitter end. We're going to hear from our President, Pat O'Doherty. We're going to hear from the Commissioner herself. She has provided us with a keynote speech. We're going to hear from our partners at E.DSO, and we're going to hear views from major industry players, from the regulators, as well as from the European Investment Bank. So stay tuned. This is going to be a great discussion, and I'm really looking forward. We're interested in hearing your perspectives as well, so don't hesitate to join the discussion. On this slide, we're showing you how you can either post your questions directly through the interface. There's a question tab in your GoToWebinar interface. Write your question in there, write who you want to address this question to, and we'll see if we can pick it up in the discussion. We have a lot of people online. We have more than 1,000 people registered. So if we don't get through all of the questions, I apologize in advance. What you can do, if you don't feel your question was heard, you can join us online for that discussion as well. You can follow us at Eurelectric, and you can post your views, questions, remarks to the ongoing discussions with hashtag PowerGrids, hashtag investments, and hashtag It's Electric. So it's time to go. And the first thing we want to do is to hear from our President, Pat O'Doherty, who is under lockdown in Ireland. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Pat O'Doherty, who's with us.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us here today. I would like to start by wishing you and your families a very happy new year. We've been through a very difficult year, and many of us continue to live and to work with significant restrictions. We have done things we could hardly have imagined 12 months ago. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we're all hopeful that 2021 will be much better. Recent years have been very encouraging in terms of climate action, and we've seen important initiatives like the Green Deal and the increased 2030 ambition progress significantly. Importantly, we have not seen a stepping back from climate action due to COVID-19, and I definitely see post-COVID future being viewed by policymakers through a climate lens. We in the electricity industry will not be found wanting, and Eurelectric recently published its position supporting increased 2030 climate ambitions. Electricity will play a key role in decarbonising Europe's economy. We can produce zero and low carbon electricity sustainably and cheaply. In the first half of 2020, 2/3 of electricity generated across Europe was carbon free, of which renewables accounted for 40%. We also know that we can use electricity in so many more places than we've used in the past, and the technological advances will only see the role of electricity increase further. All of this means that we need an electricity distribution grid that supports this ambition and realises the full potential of the electricity sector. I'm therefore delighted to introduce the launch of this first-of-a-kind study on distribution grid level investment needs and the stimulating discussion which is about to take place with our esteemed speakers. But why is this study so urgently needed? The EU power sector is now entering a new infrastructure investment cycle, driven by the goal to reach climate neutrality. Decisions taken in critical infrastructure investment in the coming years will impact the shape of the future energy system for many decades to come. There is an increasing need to integrate more and more decentralised energy and storage resources, to facilitate access to local flexibility resources, provide charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, and to ensure the distribution grid can enable electrification. The increasing participation of citizens enabled by smart metering and the uptake of prosumers requires significant distribution grid investment and will bring about a whole new set of relationships between active customers and the electricity system. The shift towards more active system management of the distribution networks will require a significant investment in digitalisation. Digital resilience is now a key consideration in itself, as cyber threats and attacks on critical energy infrastructure become much more sophisticated. We now see evolving security of supply and network resilience issues with more severe and more frequent weather events that are already triggering network upgrade works. Given all of this, it is crucial to identify now the future distribution grid investment needs and to take account of the impact on network costs and on tariffs, particularly in the context of the evolving role of the DSO. The COVID crisis and the EU recovery package provides a unique opportunity for EU governments and companies to prioritise substantial investments in electricity infrastructure, given its important impact on economic growth, on employment, on competitiveness, and on the health of citizens. Investing in distribution grid infrastructure is a no-regrets option for today and for tomorrow. It will play a central role in rebuilding and transforming our economies while laying the foundations for a sustainable and resilient power system. The level of policy and regulatory ambitions will be critical enablers of growth in networks. The new EU DSO entity will be launched in 2021 and will be supported by Eurelectric and by other industry bodies. The creation of the entity recognises the significant evolving role of the DSO as the key facilitator of decarbonisation. This study is an important part of the evidence base on the infrastructure and investment needs in distribution grids for 2030 to make the energy transition happen. Thank you for your time here today, and I do hope you enjoyed the event.
So, wise words from our president on why exactly this study is so important right now. Thank you to Pat, who was with us on tape from Ireland. Now, it is my pleasure to announce today's keynote speech by the Commissioner herself. The EU Commissioner for Energy, Ms. Kadri Simson, has been so kind to provide us with her perspective, the broad strokes, and how this whole issue of the grids is situated in the broader policy agenda of the EU. So without further ado, now I'd like to pass the word to Kadri Simson.
Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year and all the best for 2021. Starting a new year means looking at how far we have come and looking to where we are going. For energy in Europe, that future is a climate-neutral Europe guided by the European Green Deal. This goal is enshrined in our first European climate law, and our climate target plan forms part of our path, thereby aiming to reduce EU greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. Competitiveness, sustainable growth, and job creation, these are all outcomes of our ambitions. By June this year, we will present legislative proposals to deliver this 55% reduction. We intend to review the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive, including their targets. Public consultations are ongoing, so please share your views. We need the best ideas from every corner of the sector. These reviews will join the ranks of other European Green Deal initiatives already tabled by the Commission. I'll mention two particular. The strategy for energy system integration outlines a vision to create a smarter, more integrated and more optimized energy system through the better use of infrastructure. This strategy brings with it increased investments of your particular interest, such as transmission and distribution infrastructure, smart grids facilitating innovative solutions and cross-sector sharing of data, and storage infrastructure. Last month, we also presented our legislative proposals for revising the regulation on trans-European network for energy. The revision will align our support to energy infrastructure with our climate neutrality objective. It will promote the integration of renewables and new clean energy technologies into the energy system. At the same time, it will ensure security of supply, facilitating market integration and contributing to economic recovery. Added to that, it will look into promoting innovative technologies and infrastructure, such as smart grids, hydrogen networks, integrated offshore grids, and energy sector integration. It will support an increased role for distribution systems. We have our work cut out for us. It goes without saying that the role of distribution system operators is becoming even more important. By 2050, their share of electricity in our energy mix will need to at least double to cover around half of all energy consumed. A significant share of this will be connected at low and medium voltage grids. This means that DSOs will be even further involved in energy infrastructure planning and that cooperation across the energy system will need to be ensured. This is why the establishment of the EU DSO entity, which will be launched around spring, is important. It will allow European DSOs to have formal representation in the EU institutional framework and to cooperate with transmission system operators. Here, I want to take a moment to thank all 4 European DSO umbrella organizations for their work so far. We are seeing great progress. This evolution in our electricity system calls for the best implementation possible of the tools that we have already at hand with electricity market design. This will put us on the right track for supporting the Green Deal objectives. This is what success looks like: a more integrated system, a more flexible system, a more modern system, and a system built for the new world of greater electricity and renewables. In particular, it gives a more prominent role to DSOs to support consumer participation and ensure the active management of their grids. So, how do we move forward? We expect to start the work on a specific network code for demand-side flexibility or on the amendment of existing network codes in the first half of 2021. This will ensure that market-based demand-side flexibility services emerge and are able to fully participate on all electricity markets. On your side, we have a simple request. Be bold in your own thinking when it comes to innovative solutions for digitalization and the modernization of distribution grids. Recently, we have seen the power of the digital world even in the most difficult circumstances. In the same way, digitalization holds a lot of promises for the energy sector. A more efficient management of energy networks, data-driven energy services, and increased participation of energy consumers. We have invested around €1 billion to support R&I in smart grids in Horizon 2020. Over the last 3 years, we have invested €100 million specifically to support the development and application of specific digital technologies in the energy system. The Commission will prepare an action plan on the digitalization of the energy sector. And in the coming first Horizon Europe work programme, we will be funding many of the topics I have been mentioning. We also need to anticipate the challenges that come with a digitalised world. Preparatory works on the implementing acts on data interoperability and the network code on cybersecurity are progressing well. All of these plans I'm mentioning are in the context of the single biggest event to have impacted our lives right now, COVID-19, and our recovery from the pandemic. With that said, the next EU budget and our recovery funds represent an unprecedented resource opportunity to promote the green and digital transformation. We should use it. The new multi-annual financial framework and recovery package have a proposed 30% climate mainstreaming target. Meanwhile, 37% of the Recovery and Resilience Facility and of each National Recovery and Resilience Plan will need to be spent on climate-related investment. In other words, at least 249 billion euros, an unprecedented amount, will be available for climate-related investment. To support this process, the Commission proposes 7 flagship areas that all Member States could include in their recovery and resilience plans, 2 of which could be relevant to support distribution infrastructure. The first is Power Up. Future-proof clean technologies should be front-loaded, and the development and use of renewables should be accelerated, as well as their integration through modernized networks and enhanced interconnectivity. Second is Renovate, improving the energy and resource efficiency of public and private buildings to help reach our climate objectives, create local jobs, and foster digital development through smart living and metering. In addition, renewable energy will need to be the basis for the transport-related flagship, Recharge and Refuel. And here is where your study provides extremely useful guidance to Member States on what are the investment volumes and target areas. The issues that you identified will help feed into the Commission's deliberations of how to improve our regulatory environment. It will make sure that money will go to where it's needed for the modern distribution systems we are all striving for. Ladies and gentlemen, here I'll end my speech, but I wish you an excellent day, excellent discussions, and an excellent year to come. Thank you for listening.
So a positive message from the Commissioner. I'm unsure whether it was only on my side that she was caught a little bit before time. In any case, I think worthwhile taking away from her presentation that we should be bold, and also an encouraging message on regulatory initiatives coming up to ensure better handling of cybersecurity, flexibility, and a number of other issues. With that, I think it's time to take a closer look at the findings of our study. So, as I said in the beginning, this is a study that we've done in cooperation with our partners at E.DSO. We have had the help of Monitor Deloitte to do this study, and we have worked with partners in 10 different countries across Europe, major companies, national associations, to basically assess the entire European geography, north, south, east, west, islands, those different systems, those different asset compositions. What do they spell in terms of need for investments in distribution grids over the coming decade? So this is what we have here. And on the next slide, I have summed up the key findings of the study. And essentially, what we're looking at is a 400 billion euro investment challenge over the coming decade. That is, I think, by pretty much any measure, a lot of money. But we should keep in mind that that this is also, of course, the aggregate of 27 plus 1 countries that need to make those investments. It is a ramp up of investments in the ballpark of 50 to 70%. The good news is that this comes with a significant amount of societal benefits that really outweigh the cost and the investments that we need to make. Another good piece of news is that this will not translate into a massive spike in unit cost of electricity. At least that's our analysis. And last but not least, we also have to be very clear that this really relies heavily on a proper implementing framework, an enabling framework that allows us to execute these investments. Moving on to the next slide, we're going to show you a little bit of the background for why these investments are needed. Our president said it, electrification and decarbonization are 2 sides of the same coin. Now, We expect, as a consequence of the political plans to decarbonize and our commitment as an industry to decarbonize, that the demand for electricity will increase over the next decade by an average of 1.8% per year. And this is a robust finding of this study, but it also is very well aligned with what we found in our McKinsey study 2 years ago. This is the development we have to expect, and with more power, we also, of course, need more lines or more robust lines to transport them, hence the need for investments in the grids. But it's not only about increasing power demand. As we show on the next slide, it's really about a fundamental systemic transformation. And if you take a look at some of these figures just for a second, this is really fascinating, to be honest. Over the next decade, we're looking at adding some 40 to 50 million heat pumps to the grid in Europe. We're adding some 50 million electric cars, and we're adding a lot of load as a consequence of the so-called power-to-X processes, whether it's the production of hydrogen, ammonia, or linking electricity with heat systems. So significant changes and a lot of new components coming to the distribution grids, because of course the electric cars are going to charge at distribution level. Of course the heat pumps are going to be installed at distribution level. At the same time, the generation mix is going to undergo some very, very fundamental changes. The existing targets that have already been agreed, they basically imply an addition of around 500 gigawatts of new capacity over a decade. So even people working with energy investments may ask, how much is that actually? I do megawatts normally. Well, 500 gigawatts is roughly speaking half of the existing power system as we know it today in Europe. So that is a lot. Now, what's even more striking about when it comes to this system change is that 70% of this new capacity will be connected at distribution level, because we're talking about onshore wind turbines, we're talking about solar parks, we're talking about people putting solar panels on the roofs. So whereas a lot of this additional capacity would in the past go via the transmission lines, this is going to be directly connected to the distribution grids. And this is one of the fundamental changes that really also drive the need for additional investments. On the next slide, we're showing you another key reason for the need for investments, and that's essentially because our grids are aging. So on the one hand, we need to electrify massively over the next decade. On the other hand, we need to change the nature of our production and connect all that to the distribution grid. And now we have to face the fact that we also have aging infrastructure. 30% of the grids today are already over 40 years old. Unless we do something about this, it's going to be 50% that are more than 40 years old by 2030. It goes without saying that adding a lot of stuff on the demand side, adding a lot of new capacity on the production side is going to be challenging if we don't modernize the infrastructure. So renewable additions, electrification, and an aging grid are significant drivers of new investments. On top of that, we have a number of other factors that we're showing you on the next slide that basically provide this totality of investment needs. And the additional drivers are about digitization, automation. They're about resilience, as mentioned by the commissioner, and they're also about the entry of storage into the grids. Now, what's important for you to take away on this slide is that modernization in itself really is the single most important driver. We need to do something because our infrastructure is aging. Another critical takeaway on this is that we're effectively dispelling the myth that electrification is some sort of grid killer. Look at what e-mobility is making up of the entire picture. It is only a fraction. The challenge is composed of the totality, a need for modernization, more renewables coming on, electrification, and a range of new digital aspects that need to be handled. And this is what in total drives the investments. Now, you'd think that this big figure of 400 billion would translate into a lot of additional costs. But what we're showing you in the next slide is really fascinating. Actually, we're talking about a very limited increase in the unit cost of electricity. This can seem a little bit counterintuitive that even with those big investments, you'd only see a unit cost increase of 1.5%. So why is that? Well, first of all, we need to remember that electricity costs are really composed of three major components. It's the production of electricity, it's the transportation, and it's the taxes and levies. So the transportation as such is only a third really, and of the transportation, distribution grids are only one part. So you see already this is a significant reason for the limited jump in unit cost despite of these investments. The other thing that comes on top of this is that on the production side, we're going to see probably a decrease. Why? Well, because we're introducing a lot of renewables. Renewables don't have the fuel cost of fossil fuels, and renewables also have a tendency to dampen market prices because of a certain of their special characteristics. This is a little bit off scope of this presentation, but just to say we can expect a dampening of cost on the production side to overall equation of unit costs, and therefore, even with these significant investments, we're only going to see limited additions to the unit cost. On the next page, we're showing you while this limited increase in costs actually is attractive because it comes with a number of massive societal benefits, whether it's about sustainability, reducing CO2, improving air quality, whether it's about the competitiveness, saving 175 billion euros of fossil fuel imports, whether it's about the economy, the 500,000 jobs that we sustain with distribution grids in Europe, and of course the orders for equipment and services that go to a number of European manufacturers, or whether it's about the customer empowerment that comes along with the new services, the better mobility offers, and the increased control of being able to decide more specifically when and where and so on, where you want to use and spend your money on electricity. So on the next slide, we're basically coming to the difficult part, which is all this is of course not going to happen by itself. Now, I think I've taken quite a bit of time, so I don't want to go through every single aspect of this slide. We have some great representatives of the industry that will be able to lay out some of these needs. But just to sum up what this slide really says, as far as I'm concerned, the challenge over the next 10 years for the DSOs is really about planning and executing investments with a view to ensuring security of supply and improved automation and digitization while enabling the energy transition. Now that sounds doable, but you also see that that comes with a long list, wish list of improvements for the regulatory frameworks: planning, funding, execution, a clarification on the role, remuneration, flexibility, and tariffs. We heard the commissioner is already working on this, but I think we should also look at the right-hand side of the slide to note that this is really an EU level thing, but it's also very much a national level thing. It's about the national regulators, and it's about the municipalities. It's about the planning processes. So there's a whole range of regulatory interfaces that need to take this challenge seriously. We're committed to go there as an industry, but we also really need the proper support of regulators and policymakers to make it happen. So that's in essence the key findings of our study. I'm sure that you have a lot of questions, remarks, so don't hesitate to share them with us online. We'll bring up the hashtags and the places you can do this on the next slide. I think now it's time really to hear from our partners at E.DSO, who have been closely involved in this from the beginning. What is their perspective on this? What are the key messages they see in this? And with us here today, I'm very happy to have Christian Buchel, who's the chairman of E.DSO, and also part of the executive team at E.DSO. So Christian, the floor is yours. Good to see you here.
Good to see you. Thanks, Christian, for this nice presentation. We start very well this year. All the best for all of you. Yes, it's a great pleasure to give some answer on this presentation today on behalf of E.DSO members. We represent, as you know, approximately 80% of the distribution activity in Europe. And absolutely, yes, Christian, this study is a key contribution because it gives visibility and levers to make climate objective really a reality in Europe. Commissioner Simson's message, I think, arrived at a crucial time, and I hope that what has been said by Commissioner will be highly considered. Let me give maybe some elements of the context of this study. Then I will talk a little bit about the challenges which are ahead. We know the challenges. The question is what is the way and what is the pace to face these challenges, and to finish by concluding that this great piece of work can concretely change things up by making what seems maybe impossible for some counterpart in our society. To support the work of the Commission, Eurelectric, it has been said by the chairman of Eurelectric and E.DSO together with our respective members, has to be concrete, elaborated this study, because we are not, definitely not, we are not observers, we are not commentators. As companies, as entrepreneurs, we want to contribute, we want to be active, we want to do things. Yes, we are doers, and to transform this political ambition on climate objective for the sake of a European citizen. So the collaboration with Deloitte to assess the levers, and it has been shown very well by Christian, the implication of the European transition power distribution grid. This study goes back to 2019, when E.DSO board had the chance, we had the chance to have at the very first hand the presentation of the work done by our Spanish members in 2018, I think, where the first study showed that this investment in digitalization of grids would not only create thousands of jobs, it has been said, but also allow for a reduction of Spanish citizen electricity bills. Now, after these 10 representative study countries, we see that investment in network are not optional. Definitely is not an option. They are clearly a condition to ensure a cost-effective energy transition that build this greener power generation, because mostly this power generation is connected to the low and medium voltage distribution grids. This one is the precondition to ignite the electrification of the society through customers and citizens. A resilient electrification is also the backbone for the electricity access security in Europe in a period of unexpected crisis, and we are still demonstrating during this COVID-19 pandemic. We as leading DSOs in Europe all over the last year, and we continue in January, we had regular video calls to compare our experiences to ensure continuity of supply, functioning of market mechanism, guarantee the interface between suppliers and customer. Thanks to our cooperation, I think, and Europe is the right level to do this. Thanks to our cooperation, the territories, customer, generators we serve could keep their lights on. Unfortunately, we have seen all over the world that the same efficiency was not granted everywhere in the world. We may be proud, we should be proud of what Europe achieves, while keeping in mind that today's successes are due to all efforts in investment done over many years back. About the challenges, I said how strong, how fast could we face them? The analysis of the 8 different electrification drivers, e-mobility, grid automation, smart meters, of course, etc., has been quantified to give quite these impressive figures of what DSOs must do to substance them in the real life of Europeans. But our job is not only to give the figures, we have to demonstrate to decision makers, to political bodies, to citizens, to the regulators, Frau Groebel is with us, to financial institutions, to NGOs also, how essential it is to reach the requested higher level of quality investment. The study released is not only about figures, it is about transparency and creating acceptance to accelerate the transformation along the priorities of our society. The study released today is not only about electrification of uses, but really changing our societal model and our common priorities. The study released today is not only of guiding future investments, but also on providing more flexibility to regulation. It was the last slide of Christian, to foster investments in information system, in innovation, which are in some member states much less remunerated than copper and transformer. This is a pity, and it doesn't help to the transition we're speaking about. Additionally, the investment in distribution system we are talking about will contribute to the European strategic autonomy to become a global leader in this sector. For Europe, I used to say this, but for Europe, it's not too late to lead in this sector, definitely not. Plugging in Europe data centers, according to Commissioner Thierry Breton's data strategy, electrolyzer, robotics based on our model, technique and standards, this is our duty. Of course, the investment mentioned in this presentation are aligned with European strategic goals regarding climate, economic and resilience. But these investments can also be tremendously leveraged if we consider a broader definition of what is a GDP, which includes all the other positive externalities around climate, social, and way of life in our countries, in our member states, in our territories, in our villages, in our cities. Even if the situation sometimes differs from a country to another, this message is quite easier said than done. Such a bold increase, it has been said by commissioners, such a bold increase of capex up to 50% annually to more than 400 billion euros by 2030 will not only requires an increase in the workforce and knowledge, including IoT, artificial intelligence, etc., of the energy industry, but we also need a clear support, a very clear support from the proper institutions, starting from national governments to NRAs, down to municipalities, as most of the grid investments are and will scattered over our extensive distribution areas. There are some prerequisites to meet such high hopes for a greener tomorrow. The first prerequisite, I think, is that we as companies have to be efficient. I mean, both cost efficient and service efficient. This is our mission. And we are committed, we are collectively committed to it. And on EU level, even if the clean energy package, the Green Deal, and I think the remarkable recovery plan are huge step forwards in Europe, huge step forward. There are still bureaucratic hurdles. They exist in some countries on permitting, on procedures, connecting regulation, etc. In some member states, regulatory barriers against an increase of capex investment by DSO or TSOs, like GDP caps, have to be removed. We appreciate much that recent moves on EU level about a better access by DSO to EU fundings, but there is still room to progress, ensuring proper update cost recognition and founded assets and recognizing power distribution grid contributing activities within the European Commission taxonomy delegated regulation, only as an example. The next 10 years of increased investment will not only yield immediate benefits now, like stopping renewables curtailments in a lot of countries or recovering lost jobs because of COVID-19, but will give us a stable, and we need it, give us a stable framework for the future challenges to come all on electrical dependent activities across Europe. So impossible can be possible with this study. We want, you have understood it, we want to shake a little bit things up and create adherence. Climate change is affecting every country, on every continent, with weather-related disaster. In California, electricity was cut for days to prevent wildfires. In southeast France, several months ago, landslides caused by floods could have resulted in power cuts, maybe for months, if we had not anticipated with a rapid intervention force and exceptional means. Our generation, I mean we around this conference call, our generation has the duty to do the impossible, accelerate the ecological transition. Our industry, and not only we as DSOs, but all the industrial partners, all our partners, I mean manufacturers, ICT, local authorities, we have to contribute, we have to work together. We have already moved, and this is the good news, we have definitely moved from, I would say, from statements to actions. The question are, do we have the right pace? The question is, do we invest enough to avoid irreversible losses? For that matter, it was necessary, yes, to illustrate reality with these concrete figures. This is why we have done this study together with Eurelectric. This is why it was important to organize today's event. I'm very happy that so many people attend this event to communicate clearly about the figures to reach. Implementing them is not only a great opportunity for European industry and jobs, but also a strong need for the European society, I would even say for our democracies. By doing so, we will contribute to make Europe a guiding light worldwide. This is the message of my conclusion. Impossible is possible because we have decided to do this. And we have decided to precise the figures, to be transparent in the way to communicate, bold in the way to implement them on the field. So this distribution power grids study should challenge us and urge us to take action together. I'm very happy to have contributed, and so we open the next discussion. Thanks so very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, and please stay online with your camera. That was a very powerful and energizing speech. I took note of your quote, "Our generation has the obligation to do the impossible, accelerate." Very good. Let's turn over to Annegret Groebel. She represents not only the German regulator here, but really also the community of regulators across Europe, because she's the president of CEER, the Council of European Energy Regulators. Very happy to have you with us here today, Annegret. Maybe I could ask you just to basically give your first reactions to the results we've shown here today. How does that resonate with you, what you've seen here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Christian, and thank you for having me here. And I would like to present the regulator's view. And of course, the regulators are well aware that there are investment needs to react to the challenges that you outlined today in the presentation, as well as in the study. However, we have some doubts about, let's say, the size of the investment figure that come out of the study at the end. Mainly for two reasons. We think that sometimes offsetting effects have not been taken accurately into account. And namely, we also think that it seems a little bit backward looking to just go into the direction of infrastructure investment rather than also taking into account the new developments, for example, procurement of flexibility by DS, which doesn't necessarily automatically mean infrastructure investment. So this shift, I think, is an important part. We have provided and published last year a report on this, a conclusions document about the procurement of flexibility by DS operators. And also, we are, of course, as regulators, aware that the regulation, the regulatory conditions need to be, on the one side, predictable, but also take up the dynamic nature of the changes so that it fits well. And so we also have published a document relating to electricity distribution system tariffs, supporting the energy transition. So exactly what you are aiming for, and also concluding that tariffs need to, let's say, enable and encourage flexibility. But as I said, this does not necessarily automatically increase or result in infrastructure, only infrastructure investment. So that's a point here. The other point, I made it implicitly already, is that, of course, regulators are not only backward-looking or historic costs. We develop new models, but there's no need to reinvent it. A number of regulators, as we regularly show in our report of regulatory frameworks, already are applying incentive regulation. With ensuring, therefore, that there is a cost-efficient investment, and that, of course, there is the necessary possibility of refinancing the investment needs, so the capex as well as the opex. There is a TOTEX approach, and we, and I can speak here also for the German regulator, we have a TOTEX approach, we have incentive regulation, and we think that this is perfectly fitting the needs. So we are not convinced there's a need to reinvent the regulatory wheel, so to speak. And therefore, we also would like to say that we have the impression that some of the conclusions that you draw on with regard to regulatory actions, as you call it, that already now state a lack of flexibility regulation. Seems a bit premature. I mean, the transposition of the clean energy package of the electricity directive, and namely Article 32, is ongoing. And before that, I think we should not preempt the result, and we should not only already now state that there is a lack of or inconsistency or whatever, nor is there a lack of role clarity. Again, there are the provisions in the electricity directive which have a clear positioning and a clear view, additional network development plans, for example, of DS, and of course the DSO organization. Which brings into view the new role, the additional role of DSOs, and also on the European as well as on the national level. And here, therefore, we think that there is the legal provisions are there, and of course they need to be transposed and implemented. But we would like not to see that this is already at this stage set. That there is a lack of role clarity or a lack of flexibility regulation. So I think that would be preempting the results, and it cannot be done at that moment in time without any experience in that area with the new code, with the new legislation, so to speak. So that's, let's say, some first reflections that I would like to make here. And as I already stated, we also have published last year a number of documents relating to, let's say, modernizing DS regulation in the sense that I described it. So to be able to cope with these challenges also in the regulatory with the regulatory reactions. And we are well aware that this is our role, and that we are convinced that by having best practice in Europe from the regulators within CEER, that we can contribute considerably to the energy transition, which we fully embrace. So we fully agree with what was said so far, especially also from Commissioner Simson's side, but also from Christian Buchel's side, that there is absolutely, I think that's not a question at all, that we need all to do our part to ensure that the energy transition works well in a an efficient manner, and that of course all the benefits are also let's say reaching ultimately, in particular, the consumers, but all users in the intended way. And that's what we as regulators strive to ensure. And one of the part is certainly to have a fit for purpose regulation on the DS level outlined in this. Okay.
Thank you, Annegret. Just a quick follow-up question, and I just request you to just give a quick, let's say, response to that. It seems to me what you're saying is, well, these figures, we think they're too large, and the regulation is fit for purpose. That's the gist of what I get from you. I'd be interested in hearing, do you have another estimate than us? I mean, do you have a different number that you could put forward in terms of the investments needed? And could you confirm that you sort of think that everything pretty much is fit for purpose when it comes to the regulation?
Well, two things. No, we don't have a number right now. I mean, we of course look at every thing here. There are several studies ongoing, not from CEER necessarily, but what we are looking into this deeply. The statement I made is mainly due to the fact that we think that the study seems to add up all the different reasons which are well accepted without taking into account some sort of balancing off or offsetting effects. Also, I didn't mention this so far, for example, digitalization that reduces also ultimately the investment costs, yeah, and the OPEX. So we think that there, and as I said, the only solution seems to be to invest in infrastructure rather than looking also at alternatives for example, flexibility procurement via the market, etc. So that's the part where we think that it seems that it's let's say going very much in one direction. As I said, we are not doubting that there is an investment need, and you also pointed out the fact, of course, that grids are aging, and so that's the right moment, so to speak, now to modernize it, as you call it. Absolutely right. But we seem to see that the let's say the sum seems to be a bit large, yes, as I said.
Okay.
And
thank you,
Annegret. The regulation, yes, basically it needs to be applied, and there are new rules which need to be introduced now, the new rules of the clean energy package. And I think the combination of both should enable regulators to have a fit-for-purpose application of the regulation.
Okay, thank you very much. Clear message. I appreciate that. Now I'd like to bid welcome to Leonhard Birnbaum. He is the Vice President of Eurelectric. I'm very happy to have you with us here today, Leonhard. And you're also recently announced as the next CEO of E.ON, one of the biggest transnational power companies of Europe, and with a special position in grids. We've heard from Annegret Groebel. Okay, well, you know, the numbers are a bit overblown, and the regulation is pretty much where it's supposed to be. What's the perspective from your side on this, representing one of the leading distribution companies in Europe?
Yeah, good morning from my side. Thanks for the question. And as everybody following this conversation will see, we are having good discussions also with the regulators. Obviously, something that I will say now is not completely new to Ms. Groebel, but let me just do it this way. We are talking on the European level first. And if I talk to my network guys in the different countries, obviously the challenges are always slightly different everywhere. There are some markets where we have a higher modernization need. There are some markets where we have a higher need to connect new renewables. There are markets where we have offshore, there are markets where we have no offshore, and so on. So it's not that the investment needs are the same everywhere. But one thing is the same in every single market I'm active in, and I'm actually active in 7 network markets in Europe on the network side itself. Everybody everybody has a major increase in investment needs compared to the past. And we have done this analysis independent of Euroelectric, but then we have been happy to actually introduce also all our knowledge into the Euroelectric study. So we absolutely have we are seeing higher costs. So this is number one. And if I look at my day-to-day business, the requests which we get for connection, then the follow-up investments that we need to make to actually satisfy those customer requests, we actually can show in our investment plans that more and more money is needed for connection only, and it's like it's increasing. So that's number one. Also a bit commenting on Ms. Groebel. So it goes up. Now let me just maybe say something on the size. I would argue the following: if we invest too little or too late, actually the increase will be significantly higher. Christian Buchel has shown that the investment needs for e-mobility are actually quite limited. And we fully agree on that. We have done the analysis, but only if we invest already now as if we would have 20, 30, 40 million e-cars in the system. If we wait for the cars to enter the system and then make the investments in the networks, it will be massively more expensive. So if you want, I would argue it's all about invest now or regret later. It's, I mean, Pat or Deherty said in the beginning, it's a no regret option to invest into DSOs. I would even say I would go beyond that. It's a must do to invest now, because otherwise our customers will regret it later, because it will become much more expensive. And I could even go now one point, one pass further, just to build on what you just said, Ms. Groebel. If let's assume the number that we are indeed shooting at too high investments, and the number is, let's say, 10% lower than what we just put forward, that would be eaten up in 2 years. So it's actually significantly cheaper from the customer side if we actually invest now. But in case we overinvest, that mistake is corrected very fast by the development of the system. If we underinvest, it's extremely expensive. So my key point is, this is the best number which you currently have. I think actually we have taken the dampening effects and the counteracting effects into consideration, but let's not get into that discussion. Let's just argue that in any case, let's work with the best number, but in any case, let's make sure that if we make an error, we make an error on investing too fast, because that we can correct easily, rather than investing too little, which we cannot correct fast.
Very clear point from Leonhard. Underinvesting is more expensive than overinvesting. Very interesting. I'd like to bring Knud into the discussion. Knud Petersen, he's the EVP of the Danish company Andel. And he's both overseeing the activities in the grid space and also on the regulatory side. Knud, you have been dealing with this study. You've been chairing and overseeing this study in Euroelectric in your capacity as chairman of the distribution committee. Have we forgotten about, or have you in the group forgotten about, let's say, the offsetting effects and the possibility of introducing flexibility markets locally? Are we overlooking that? Are we attaching too much importance to the physical assets?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think the main benefit with the study, I think, is that now we have for the first time a common methodology. Thanks to Deloitte and their cooperation with a number of DSOs, we have now a consistent calculation of investment needs. Whether it would be 400 or something else, that's not the interesting point. As Leo said, it will increase, that's for sure. You cannot handle the electrification and decarbonization without increasing investment needs. But on this basis, when we have the number, now we can develop on, you could say, the intelligent part. We have made our assumptions on flexibility. We need to make them, but we don't know exactly about the flexibility before we interact with our customers. And therefore, we need systems in place to interact with customers. That includes pricing tariffs, that includes data infrastructure, that includes a digitization of our transactions. And we are in our preparative mode right now. We have come some way, but what we try to show here, we need a step change. And we need to do that in partnership with our regulators and our customers. And therefore, the regulators should dedicate trust to the DSOs that we can do this, because we need to build that competence to enact the flexibility to be in interactive cooperation with our customers. And this is really the big change. It changes the structure in the way we work. It changes the structure in our cost figures. But we can do that, and the more intelligent we can do that, the better for the economy. But we need to prepare beforehand. This takes time to develop. It takes time to develop the customer's practice, and it takes time to develop the new way of doing it, grid planning and enact data, advanced data and analytics. And we know today much more about our grid than we did only a few years ago. But I'm afraid that the regulators are not really understanding the massive change which we have to undertake. And therefore, I think we need to enact much more partnership with the political regulatory environment together with the DSOs to develop the timely infrastructure, which is not only copper, but also the digital part and the data part. And I think this is very promising, because this is a way of modernizing not only the infrastructure as such, but our whole economy, and that's to the benefits for all our societies.
The way I heard Annegret on the regulatory side was a little bit, look, don't preempt the need for additional regulatory action. We have the CEP, it needs implementation. Let's see how far that takes us. Knud, do you agree with that? And where do you see the most pertinent need for changes in order to basically execute these investments and deliver on what we've shown here?
I think we understand bits and pieces everywhere, and we have done also we have the thinking enacted to some extent. But what we need is a new way of working together, and we need to get rid of barriers, because although we have some thinking in the theoretical development of regulation, a lot of parts in the regulation is working in the opposite direction. We have benchmarking methodology which just look into the history of our books, and the companies are using a lot of work just to enlighten the regulator about old history, which is not really relevant. And we need this forward-looking partnership, and that is something I think which is not really understood in the regulatory and political environment. If we should implement these goals, then we need to accelerate the way we deliver on all the matters which we need to deliver. Not only the regulators, of course, also we as DSOs are going into a step change.
We're gonna ask Annegret to react to this in a moment. Before we come back to you, Annegret, I'd like to bring in Manuel Baritaus, who's a senior economist at the European Investment Bank. I'm very happy to have you with us here today, Manuel. Maybe you could give us a first reaction, seen from your perspective on what you've seen here today, the investment needs, and where you see the barriers for investments in grids.
Yeah, thank you for inviting the EIB. Yes, I will indeed comment on the barriers that we see for investment from our own perspective. Before that, let me remind that we are a quite important player in the field of infrastructure investment, and in particular T&D, electricity T&D investment. Over the last few years, we have financed on average 2.6 billion euros per year of T&D electricity infrastructure, around 50% of which is for distribution companies, which is not very well done. We tend to see the EIB as financing essentially large scale in interconnections, but we are also financing distribution companies, around 10 projects per year on average. Of course, we see investments in regulated assets as low risk. But as a public bank, we are increasingly asked to justify our investment and to show that we are crowding in other investors. And so when we thought about this in 2019 for the review of the energy lending policy of the bank, we decided that it was important for the bank to continue supporting electricity distribution grids, because we see an investment gap in this sector. And I think the Eurelectric study presented today illustrates this perfectly. Now we can discuss the numbers, of course, but I think we can all agree on the fact that there is a huge investment gap. So as a public bank, we also support EU policy, and we want to increasingly focus our activity in the field of electricity distribution on what is important for the bank, meaning climate change, digitalization, and then we'll say also a few words about the just transition, energy transition dimension. So the first, as you may know, the bank is becoming the EU climate bank. We decided last year to phase out lending to fossil fuel energy projects, and this includes lending to gas infrastructure projects reliant on natural gas. This means that from now on, we'll essentially focus on electricity distribution in this area. We have already financed several projects to increase the resilience of distribution grids, mainly undergrounding. We are currently financing around 10 projects to roll out EV charging stations. And we wish to continue investing in expanding the grid to integrate renewables. The barriers, you asked Christian about the barriers that we are seeing. I think the key barrier for us as a bank active in big projects usually is that the distribution industry is very fragmented. So very often we are seeing projects that are to be aggregated in order to be able to be financed by us, which brings some complexity. The other barrier to investment that we are seeing in this field, and I have in mind in particular renewables, is that this is still very much forward-looking. Some of the projects that we are seeing are not in practice justified by a pipeline of new renewable projects connected to the distribution grid. So we need to take a forward-looking approach to be able to justify such investments. As you all know, the EU taxonomy on sustainable finance will mean that T&D investments will be considered as climate action, and we expect this will help us to increase our activity in this field. The second dimension is digitalization. We spoke about it quite a lot. This is key to enable the flexibility, to increase flexibility, and indeed to minimize investment needs in distribution infrastructure, which will be expensive. So we are already doing this. So far, over the last 13 years, we have financed the rollout of, or contributed to finance the rollout of 70 million of smart meters in more than 11 countries. We are increasingly wishing to focus and to finance software, digital twins of networks to map power flows. The key barrier that we are seeing here is that, again, we are talking about small-scale investments. They are generally not standalone investments, but part of overall investment plans of distribution companies, and they are not always properly recognized by regulators. So we encourage, if I can say so here, DSOs to structure projects that can be labeled as digitalization when they come to us. I think this will be important to help us increasing our activity in this field. And the third and last dimension, if I may, is that we shouldn't forget that some countries have higher investment needs, in particular and we need to ensure a just transition. This has long been an important mandate for the bank too, and this has a cohesion dimension as well. For these countries, the bank is still, of course, very keen to continue financing modernization of electricity grids, and we can also increase the share of our financing for such projects in some countries. The countries that are benefiting from the modernization fund, we can go up to 75% financing of these investments. So just to conclude, in practice, the bank can finance all distribution investment in the electricity sector. The majority of these investments, thanks to the taxonomy, will be counted as climate finance. We are already an important player, but still our financing represents around 4% of future investment needs in the T&D industry sector in the next decade. So there is room to expand our financing, and please, we encourage project developers to come to us and structure the projects around our priorities in terms of climate and digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Very interesting points. Annegret, back to you. We heard, well, so is it 400 billion? Is it 390 or 370? We heard there is a huge investment gap, and I think that regardless of whether we agree on the last penny, we can all see that we're looking into a future which is hugely decentralized, where the pace is massively increasing. So something needs to happen, and the level of investments it does have to go up. I think what was very interesting that I'd like to hear your view on was some of the things that Knud said, that what's really needed is a much more collaborative approach, a partnering approach, where some of the barriers that the DSOs are facing today are removed, and they are given more flexibility to make the investment as they deem appropriate. I guess that's a difficult, let's say, viewpoint for a regulator to accept, or how do you see that?
Well, okay, first, glad that there seems to be some recognition that maybe the number is at the upper end. But and just to confirm, I never denied that there is an investment need for the reasons outlined in the study. But I think we should also be a bit realistic there. To be honest, as a regulator, I think it is, of course, and that's what I think all NRAs are doing in practice, important to have the dialogue and engagement with the DSOs. That's without question, and I think that's ongoing everywhere. However, I have some reservations against a collaborative approach. Regulation functions only if there is a hard enforcement, and I think that should not be forgotten. That is not to say that the way we regulate can possibly leave more flexibility, but I just want to make the distinction here clearly about, let's say, designing regulation that it is properly reflecting the needs. That's one thing, and I think that this is possible with the tools we have or are being given now with the clean energy package, and the question about who decides on this. And I think on the latter, there is no question that this is the regulator to decide, for example, on the revenue cap or a price cap or whatever. And as I said, also, I think it is clear that we need a modern regulation, as we have outlined in our papers, that provides these incentives for for the investment deemed appropriate at a appropriate rate of return. And of course, there are discussions here. But as I just want to be clear about this, that there is what we call dynamic regulation, forward-looking, and again, I would like to say I'll be frank here, I reject the hypothesis that regulators have to be taught by the DSOs on what the challenge is. We are aware of the challenge. We have our regulatory tools. We are aware that we have to use these tools in a forward-looking way. I fully agree with this. But I think we have enough understanding in that regard to do our job properly.
I'd be interested in hearing your view on what Knud said about the benchmarking methodology. Is that sufficiently forward-looking in your view, or is it, as he said, something that's basically inspecting the past?
Well, let's say these efficiency benchmarks, which we also do in CEER, and this year is one where the next round is designed. We published recently the latest ones. The issue is there, of course, the data is historic, but this does not mean that the perspective and the conclusions aren't forward-looking. But of course, you can fit into the models only hard facts. You cannot fit in, let's say, future estimations. So I think there is a bit of the way the models work. And the important here is, of course, to design and to model the future grid, taking into account all these needs. But it starts from let's say, the current grid plus certain data that stems from the current situation. So the data starting point is based on factual data, which does not mean that only the past is compared, but the models calculate in taking into account parameters that outline the estimation for the future needs to cope with the energy demand. So there is clearly a future in certain parameters. There is clearly a forward-looking or future-oriented element and parameterization taken into account. So I think that's not only historic data.
Okay, thank you. I can see here that this is not the conclusion. This is certainly the beginning of a very interesting discussion about exactly what the future is going to look like and how fast we need to make those investments. We're coming towards the end, but I'd like to give the word very briefly to Leonhard Birnbaum, and then afterwards to Christian Buchel before we close up. Leonhard, do you want to make just a few short closing remarks?
Yeah, actually, I enjoyed the discussion. It was not a boring one. I think we showed that this is not a fully aligned picture, which may be good, but let me be very clear. I think we all agree that there's a massive investment need. We all agree on the drivers for this investment need. Actually, we now for the first time have a reasonable number we can work with, and that has a high value. Actually, I personally believe this is the lower boundary of the additional investment need, because this is only the number if we invest now, and if we take all obstacles away to invest now in a way that it is cost efficient. I actually see at least a 50% likelihood that we don't do that in a sufficient way everywhere, and then actually the number is higher, as the example on the e-mobility, which I quoted, but there are others. If we digitize too late, we will actually need to invest more into copper. Actually, if you look at it, we have a very low number for digitization in the study, which actually then at the same time means also we have a pretty low number for modernization. I think the numbers can easily be higher. But as I said, no matter what, I think it's the best number we have, and it's the only number which we have on a European level, and that is a high value. And I think we should now work with that. And again, I repeat my point, you know, a mistake to the lower side actually is expensive for consumers. A mistake on the upper side is actually cheap for consumers. Now, just one comment on regulation. I actually support what Knud has been saying. I'm not saying, and I think also Knud didn't say that we want to teach the regulators what they need to do. But what we said, we are confronted with challenges which we can actually master better if we jointly actually figure out what we need to do to actually get those investments done, which are crucial for the energy transition. In that sense, I see a need for further development of regulation, actually, as every DSO in Europe sees that. And that actually, I think, is a statement by itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonhard. Very clear words here from you at the end. Christian Buchel, we just saw you a second ago. Feel free to turn on your camera and give us your closing remarks. We need to be fairly short because we're running out of time.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, really, I enjoy really this discussion. I said that the study shake up a little bit things, and this is a success because the discussion is very good. Definitely, yes, Ms. Groebel, the question of flexibility is clearly on our roadmap. It's clearly, and thanks to the rollout of smart meter, thanks to the related article in the clean energy package, but also thanks to the very agile new or existing market players. The first call for tenders all over Europe, including in France this year, we launched call for tenders for flexibility. But definitely, as Leo just said, these figures, we think that these figures have to be put on the table, and it's not against nobody, it's put it on the table clearly, and this is the start of the discussion. So I'm very, very happy and enjoy really much this discussion. Thanks to Christian Buchel for having organized it very well.
Thank you very much to all of you. I enjoyed this discussion a lot as well, and it was great to hear a little bit of diverging views. We can see that we have plenty in front of us in terms of making sure that this discussion continues and that we hopefully, let's say, can align views. And just for reference, we stick to this number. We believe that this is a sound methodology, and we have done our best to really come forward with a very, very clear and well-founded estimate. So so we look forward to a response or an alternative view from regulators. That would be very interesting, and I think that would only qualify the debate. So we're coming to the end, and I don't want to try to sum up this very rich discussion. I'll just pick out a few things. I really like that quote of Christian. Our generation has the obligation to do the impossible, which is to accelerate. And building on that, we could quote the commissioner. So let's be bold, and let's not think that overinvesting is more expensive than underinvesting, and let's shape the regulation accordingly. I think that's all for us today. We're a bit over time, but we are still pretty much on schedule. If you look at the slide just below us, you'll see some of the upcoming events that we have for you from the Eurelectric team. Already in February, we have a event coming up on e-mobility, and towards the midst of the year, we will have our annual Power Summit. So stay tuned and be in touch. Thank you very much and have a good day.